Hey everyone! Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Nikki, I talk about animation, and this time around I am diving into the colorful world of Steven Universe and talking about the very interesting case of the relationship between Lars Barriga and Sadie Miller and how it wasn't meant to be. Funnily enough, I got the idea for this video probably about a week before the announcement of the spin-off series Lars of the Stars, when I came across someone online complaining about Lars and Sadie not getting together, going so far as to calling it bad writing, which immediately had me thinking about their relationship throughout the entire course of the Steven Universe franchise so far. Although during the original run of the series, I fully expected the two of them to get together, and I was taken aback when it was revealed that their relationship fell apart in Steven Universe Future, but I didn't have to think for very long before I realized that the Crewniverse writers really never promised the audience that these two would get together. Despite the fact that both of them clearly have feelings for each other, there aren't really any Lars and Sadie moments that scream these two are going to end up together. We actually have the exact opposite in the Uncle Grandpa crossover episode.
None of this is canon, but this is.
Oh no! I can't!
So this video is my analysis of how Lars and Sadie are a canonical unship. I used to refer to them as an anti-ship, but it's because I realized my definition of anti-ship is different from everyone else's. I define it as two characters I don't want to be together just because I don't want them to be together. Not because there's anything problematic about them, just I like their dynamic differently as platonic. Or in some cases where the story doesn't do a good enough job at establishing why I should care about their romance. So I'm coining the concept of unshipping. And just to make the distinction here, the difference between an unship and a non-ship is that a non-ship, like Diana and Bojack, is when there are no serious feelings between the characters, but in this case there are, and it just doesn't work out. Let's get analyzing. Just to get this out of the way, obviously the primary reason why Lars and Sadie don't end up together is that Steven accidentally turns Lars into his immortal, non-aging familiar, which pretty much means that Lars isn't really a human anymore, and therefore him and Sadie are automatically incompatible. But even ignoring all that, if we only look at the first 4 seasons where Lars is still a human, any romantic relationship between the two of them seems to be a lot more trouble than it's worth. Which is not to say that the two of them are terribly toxic toward each other. There are many canonical couples in fiction who do far worse things to each other and still end up together. It's simply that they don't really have any moments that speak in favor of their relationship. It is really easy to pin all the blame for the two of them not getting together squarely onto Lars and saying he's too immature for them to have a functioning relationship. And admittedly, it is true that Lars is very immature and has a lot of growing up to do. We're never giving his exact age, but he's probably like 17 or 18, and he clearly has no direction in life. He has these really sweet parents who are trying their best to gently guide him in some kind of direction. They let him move into the attic in the hopes that it will improve his grades, but it doesn't. His parents are actively concerned that he will turn to crime.
Are Lars a burglar?
No, you know we've been ready for this day.
And he also doesn't really talk to them about his life, to the point that they don't even know who Sadie is. He also slacks on his job at the Big Donut, leaving most of the work to Sadie. He has always been insecure and afraid of how other people perceive him, that he let these insecurities cost him his best friendship with Ronaldo when he was like 12.
Come on, Ronnie. You know I can't let people see me like that.
He is so desperate to befriend and earn the approval of the cool kids that he cannot act casually around them, which causes the cool kids to dislike him because of how inauthentic he is. Sadie is his only real friend, and she does almost all of the work to make their friendship function. But speaking of Sadie, we also need to acknowledge that she is herself also quite immature. Granted, a lot of her immaturity is caused by her mother, Barb, whose enthusiasm and support for Sadie's hobbies often overwhelm and put pressure on Sadie, causing her not to want to continue with said hobby.
Hey Mom, swimming looks fun! Then bam, suddenly I'm anchoring a 400-meter relay for the Beach City Seals! Hey Mom, I thought signing up for softball would be nice. 6 birthdays later, I'm still getting nothing but knee pads and batting helmets! nuts!
severely limiting her social circle and causing her to not have a whole lot of friends. Which leaves Sadie with only her job at the Big Donut as her social circle, and it is through here that she has her friendship with Steven and her whatever she has with Lars. And finally, it is important to recognize that the reason why the audience is easily tricked into believing that the two of them will get together is because Steven is our POV character and we understand the other characters through his vision. And Steven has a tendency to wear rose-colored glasses and perceives the world with an endless amount of optimism and naivete. So first off, it is fairly easy to associate Lars and Sadie with each other. They both work at the Big Donut. Some of the other residents of Beach City and even the Crystal Gems refer to them as Donut Children or Donut Boy, Donut Girl, and Steven usually considers them in the same breath, such as the first time he talks to Peridot and he lists off humans he knows. He lists Lars and Sadie together as if they are one.
Oh no, there's lots of humans. There's my dad, Connie, Lars and Sadie, the mailman, Onion, I think.
And for most of the series, they usually appear in the same episodes. Alright, so let's talk about the story. In their early appearances, Lars and Sadie are usually bickering. We mostly see them whenever Steven visits the Big Donut, and they are usually together. And this is where Steven's POV becomes really interesting. At first, you could look at their bickering as somewhat innocuous. It doesn't have to mean anything. But in the episode Bubble Buddies, when Steven seeks out Lars and Sadie to help him and Connie break free from his bubble, we hear how Steven perceives their relationship.
Do they get along?
They're crazy about each other.
So here we have Steven telling the audience how he perceives this relationship, making us view it the same way he does. And this perception could be somewhat strengthened a couple of episodes later in Tiger Millionaire, where we see the two of them attend the underground wrestling rink in Beach City. This is the first example we have of the two of them hanging out together outside of work in a setting which could also kind of be a date. We also frequently see them exchange tender glances, and sometimes they are having conversations that the audience and Steven are not entirely privy to, and sometimes they even hang out privately together in each other's bedrooms. Among the cast of characters, Lars and Sadie are usually paired together. But then we have an episode like Lars and the Cool Kids, where we see that Lars wants to broaden his social circle and befriend the cool kids independently of Sadie.
I don't spend my whole life at work. I do other things.
Later on toward the end of season 4, it is very clear that Lars doesn't want the cool kids to associate him with Sadie. He basically wants to befriend them on his own and doesn't really want her to be an addition to that, which is also demonstrated through his jealousy when he learns that Sadie has become friends and bandmates with the cool kids in the episode Lars of the Stars in season 5. Anyway, returning to season 1 land, we have the episode Coach Steven, where Steven once again mentions his perception of Lars and Sadie's relationship.
You could beat up Lars, and you don't have to starve to death if Sadie divorces you.
We're not married.
And then we get to one of the significant Lars and Sadie episodes, Joking Victim. This is the episode where Lars accidentally slips and falls and then pretends to have hurt his back so badly that he needs to take the day off and have Sadie do all the work. Sadie lets Steven fill in for Lars, and the two of them talk about her relationship with Lars. And this is where the cracks in the hull of the ship begin to appear. Sadie tells Steven a story about how she once spent hours waiting in line to buy Lars a video game because he was banned from the only shop selling it, which is an unfortunate example of Sadie's lack of confidence, the fact that she doesn't really have any friends, and the way that she has let her crush on Lars go so far that she doesn't really have any self-respect.
There was this one time the new Army of War game was coming out, but Lars was banned from the only place selling it. He wanted it so bad. So who does he beg to stand in line for 7 hours? Me! I didn't think much of it.
She's still very moved that when she brought the video game over to Lars, he had bought a box of oyster crackers because they're her favorite. And while this is technically nice that Lars has listened to her enough to know what her favorite snack is, it is also just the bare minimum he could do in contrast to what she had just done for him. This is also the first episode to indicate that the two of them have a sexual relationship.
He let me be his player too, and we spent the whole night together.
That really is nice. Must have been one great video game.
Yeah, it was.
And later in the episode, we learn that Sadie has felt numerous times that Lars doesn't respect her or care about her when she catches him hanging out with the cool kids while he's supposed to be homesick with a back injury. Sadie is so upset about the fact that Lars doesn't really respect her or seemingly even care about her that she douses a donut with fire salt to burn him back. And after Lars has suffered a severe case of dragon breath, she finally confronts him about the way he makes her feel.
After all I do for you, you lie to me so you can sneak off with some other girl?
And unfortunately, while she is seemingly prepared to begin the process of moving on from him, Lars offers to help her clean up the mess they made, and everything just resets for them. After this, we have the two-parter Mirror Gem and Ocean Gem, where Sadie and Lars each tell Steven about their plans for the summer when there will be a lot of tourists coming through Beach City. Lars talks about how he is hoping to flirt with a lot of girls coming into town without their boyfriends, hoping to get a few numbers, and maybe even being able to call one of them. Sadie is clearly jealous at this type of scorn. She herself hopes that she will make a new friend during the summer. This demonstrates the different ways the two of them view their relationship, where Lars doesn't see Sadie as a serious romantic potential, more so like a friend that he feels completely confident talking about his other romantic escapades with, while Sadie still hopes that her and Lars could be a thing. But we gotta give her the credit that at least she doesn't try to make him jealous.
Yes! Babe City, here we come! Whoa!
And then moving on to another of the big hitters, Island Adventure. This is the episode where Steven has mastered the warp pad, so he invites Lars and Sadie to come along with him for an adventure because they are both really bored in Beach City. They go to Mask Island, and this is where Sadie makes what is definitely a very questionable decision in regards to a potential romantic relationship. She hides the warp pad from Lars and Steven so that they cannot get home, which leads to the trio staying on the island for probably at least a fortnight. And while Steven and his endless optimism is completely fine being on the island, he's used to crazy adventures, and he has faith that the crystal gems will come and save them, Lars constantly teeter-totters between being panicked and being okay. There are moments where he enjoys just being on the island. They can relax most of the time. They don't really have a lot of things they need to do. They take everything in a reasonable tempo, and Lars gets to play around with his love for cooking. But at the same time, Lars reacts as most humans probably would do in that situation, which is that he still really wants to get home. He has a cell phone with him, but he doesn't have any service, and being stuck on this island also forces him to think about his place in the world and who would really miss him, who would really care that he's gone. In a moment of vulnerability, he opens up to Sadie about how he often feels alone even when he's around people.
Do you ever get lonely? Even when you're around people?
And after having spent a lot of time on the island bonding, he goes so far as to kiss Sadie, and she kisses him back, until they are interrupted by Steven and his trusted ukulele. I love the way Steven walks through life with very limited social skills that so often work out in his favor. And just to ruin the vacation even further, the invisible gem monster shows up, and in a desperate attempt to escape, Sadie finally reveals that she covered up the warp pad, which Lars is not at all ready to just roll with and then have a conversation about it back home. Which I gotta admit, I don't really blame him for. Like, technically, Sadie did kidnap him and Steven, just without their knowledge. But the reasoning for Sadie's decision is also really interesting to her character. Sadie is aware of Lars's lack of confidence and how it's holding him back from being a fully actualized version of himself, and surely correctly deduces that this is one of the things preventing them from having a possible relationship. So for her, being on this island is an opportunity for Lars to grow and become a better person through gaining skills and the confidence that come with those skills. But because she knows that Lars would never agree to something like this, she feels the need to trick him.
You were just gonna leave, but I knew how much you really needed this! Why don't you ever let me help you?
The show revisits this part again towards the end of season 4, where Sadie is also trying to support Lars with revealing more about himself to the world around him, like letting others know that he enjoys baking, specifically bringing a dessert along to the cool kids' potluck. She also acknowledges to Steven that she is basically trying to fix Lars's life instead of worrying about her own problems.
Maybe I should be trying to fix my life instead of his.
Sadie has built a lot of her own personalities around the idea that her and Lars could potentially eventually become a couple. And while Lars feels like he needs a larger social circle around him, Sadie would be satisfied if it was just the two of them, and apparently Steven. And because her intention with their extended stay on the island were technically good, she never really acknowledges her fault or the selfishness of her actions in this situation. When Lars confronts her about the fact that she created the situation that allowed him to become so vulnerable he kissed her, she turns it around on him.
You kissed me on the mouth!
And then she takes all of her frustrations into battling the invisible monster and wins. So in this episode, we see how the two of them push each other to their limits by not really listening to or acknowledging how the other person feels and adjusting their behavior to be less selfish. Following this, they have a few more minor appearances in episodes where they're still just working at the Big Donut. Among them, we have the episode Alone Together, the first appearance of Stevani, which also shows us something very interesting about Sadie, namely that she is queer. My own headcanon is that she is what is called polysexual, which is someone who is attracted to multiple genders, but not all of them. The pride flag is similar to pan, except where the pan flag is yellow, the poly flag is green. Within the Steven Universe franchise, we know that Sadie is attracted to men, i.e. Lars, and non-binary people, i.e. Stevani and Shep. And now for their last notable appearance in season 1, we have Horror Club. This is the episode where Ronaldo is hosting a horror movie night in the lighthouse and has invited Steven, who in turn has invited Sadie. This is also the first time we learn about Sadie's love for horror movies. Anyway, when Steven invites Lars to come along, he initially says no because he doesn't want to hang out with Ronaldo, but when he learns that Sadie is going, he decides to come along anyway. Definitely jealous that she would be spending the evening with other people while he wouldn't have anything to do. It's also notable that in the beginning of the episode, he's kind of flirty joking with her like, uh-oh, if you don't hurry up, I'm gonna lock you inside the store, haha.
Sadie, better hurry up. I'm gonna lock you in.
Later on, during the shenanigans at the movie night, we see Lars constantly being on edge about Sadie getting along with Ronaldo, his former best friend. He's constantly trying to ridicule Ronaldo in front of Sadie, which doesn't really work because Sadie is being polite and is actually interested in what Ronaldo is interested in. When the lighthouse then begins acting up, Lars is trying to get Sadie on his side to isolate themselves from Ronaldo and Steven, accusing them of being responsible for what's going on. He's trying to convince Sadie that they should just leave, which makes Sadie really uncomfortable that Lars would just turn on the others without a care for their well-being.
All this stuff. They've got to be doing it somehow. We've got to ditch these guys. Come on.
I'm not ditching anyone.
Something she feels Lars is more than willing to do to people, including her. Despite this, Sadie is still clearly smitten by him throughout the episode. She is visibly moved when he expresses concern about her after the ordeal in the lighthouse. Lars is also clearly jealous throughout the episode of Sadie interacting with Ronaldo, who is clearly flirting with her. This is where I realized how few appearances these two actually have in the original show. In season 2, there aren't any significant episodes where we deal with their relationship, but I do want to talk about Sadie's song. This is the episode where Steven is trying to help Sadie perform at Beachapalooza, and he and Barb get carried away with all of their ideas and suggestions for how Sadie's performance should go, eventually causing her not to want to perform after all because what she wanted to do has been completely derailed. And this kind of behavior from Steven is really interesting in connection to Sadie and Lars. Steven is really compassionate and empathetic, and he always does his best to communicate with others. But he has a particular blind spot when it comes to Lars and Sadie. Not only has he convinced himself that they are in love and in a committed relationship, but he often can't really connect himself to the people they are. He sees them how he wants to see them and doesn't really respect their boundaries.
How long have you been watching us?
Don't you know what privacy is?
People walk in and out of my room all the time.
Which is peculiar considering his relationship with so many of the other Beach City townies. Although some of the adults really don't understand Steven, most of the young people really like him, and he is on a good wavelength with the likes of the cool kids, Kiki, Ronaldo, Onion, Petey. Even if he doesn't understand all of them, he is still able to hang out with them in a way that makes everybody happy. But he forgets himself around Lars and Sadie, as seen with how how he never connects to how Sadie is uncomfortable with her mom coming in and taking over her performance. Also in Joking Victim, when he doesn't understand the gravity of Sadie's feelings at Lars's betrayal, and the way he thinks the fire salt prank is just brilliant, even though he knows what fire salt did to him. He also considers Lars to be his BFF, even though he has no reason to think that.
What would happen if I said hi to my BFF Lars? Our friendship is deep but complicated.
It really is the rose-colored glasses where he sees Lars and Sadie as the ideal picture for what he wants them to be, instead of recognizing them as the messy, complicated people they really are. They're basically a precursor for all the crazy adventures he ends up going on when he's confronted with the fact that not everyone in the universe is good and well-meaning. Alrighty, in season 3 we do have a very interesting episode. That would be The New Lars. This is the episode where Steven accidentally astral projects himself into Lars's body and takes it over for the day. And Steven basically decides to act like the version of Lars he thinks he should be. He runs around Beach City with a big smile on his face, all naive and open and getting along with everybody. He's just being happy-go-lucky, which is very unlike the incredibly self-conscious Lars.
This isn't the Lars we know. Maybe Lars is actually a good guy who likes making people feel good.
And then Steven makes the very questionable decision of going to Sadie's house as Lars and then telling Sadie as Lars that he loves her. This upsets Sadie because she thinks that Lars is manipulating her, really highlighting the kind of relationship they have wherein Lars is taking clear advantage of Sadie's obvious crush on him, and Sadie increasingly losing patience with this type of behavior.
Well, if it ain't the human boomerang, always coming back to me.
We also once again see the way Steven misunderstands their relationship, believing that Lars confessing his love for Sadie would automatically fix any problems between them. At the end of the episode, after Steven has woken up and is back in his old body and Lars has control over his body again, Lars is upset that everyone liked the Steven version of him better than they like him, including his parents. Ouch. But Steven reminds him that there is one person who prefers the real Lars, which is of course Sadie. And on the one hand, this would seem sweet that Sadie prefers the real Lars over this fake performance of him, even though he would give her the one thing she thought she wanted, and open an actual relationship based on love. But when we consider the way that Lars is very standoffish with Sadie, the episode begins with him rejecting her suggestion that they could hang out on their day off. It points to Sadie being masochistic in this relationship, that she would rather have a guy who isn't nice to her and won't commit to her than someone who actually loves and cares for her and wants to be around her.
Me and Sadie aren't getting married. We aren't even dating. And if she thinks we are, that's her problem.
Another interesting detail we learn in this episode is that Lars's real name is actually Laramie. Lars is a name he chose for himself and has apparently been using at least since he was a preteen. This demonstrates how Lars is dissatisfied with the person he is and is trying to find an identity that fits him. Again, similar to how he wants to befriend the cool kids, he's trying to make himself be the person he wants to be through external factors instead of just being that person. Moving right along to season 4, we have the episode Future Boy Soltron, where Steven is pretending to be a fortune-telling carnival toy. Lars and Sadie come by and don't recognize Steven, so they ask Soltron if they should play hooky for the day. And Steven offers his personal headcanons of their personalities, declaring that Lars acts like he doesn't care, but secretly he actually does like doing a good job, and that Sadie really likes being in charge but would be impressed if Lars stepped up to the plate. And strictly speaking, sure, Sadie is the more responsible of the two, often taking charge at the big donut. She has to boss Lars around if she wants him to do anything. And later on, when we see Lars baking or when he becomes space pirate captain, he thrives and is proud of himself for being good at stuff. So on the one hand, Steven's assessment is not completely off, but it's not a bullseye either.
Is it weird that it knows our names?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
In Tiger Philanthropist, we once again return to the Beat City underground wrestling ring, where we see Lars and Sadie once again attending to watch the Purple Puma and Tiger Millionaire fight. This episode is an example of how badly Steven wants to make people happy. When Amethyst doesn't want to wrestle as the Purple Puma anymore, Steven is prepared to quit until he realizes that Lars really wants Tiger Millionaire to keep on fighting. So in an homage to misguided spin-offs, Steven begins wrestling as Tiger Philanthropist, trying to change up his gimmick, but he learns that Lars doesn't like Tiger Philanthropist, so he tries changing direction again in order to appease him.
What do you want him to do? Just tell me!
I don't know!
I can only imagine what magical hold Lars has over Sadie and Steven that caused both of them to want to make him happy so badly. But this is one of the things I find really interesting about Lars. He's a type of character I've come to realize I just really like, the emotionally stunted asshole who has to dramatically change his ways in order to become happy and fulfilled in life. I think if you look at my video history, you'll know what kind of characters I'm referring to. An interesting note about the episode here is that at the end, when Lars is being forcefully dragged from the wrestling show, Sadie is leaving with him. She doesn't have to leave, but she chooses to go with him. And so we reach the pivotal episode that sows the seed for the very dramatic directions Lars and Sadie's lives will take. The Good Lars. So in this episode, the cool kids invite Lars, Sadie, and Steven to come to their potluck. Sadie's trying to convince Lars that he should share his love of baking with others and that he should bake something to bring to the potluck. Her and Steven help him bake a cake he can bring along. And though Lars is really proud of the cake, he confides in Steven that he is terrified at showing up to this potluck with this cake and with Sadie, really showing himself off to these people he is trying so desperately to befriend for the person he is, but who he doesn't want to be.
If I show up to this party with my family's weird purple cake and with Sadie, everybody's gonna know I love baking and everybody's gonna know I love... This isn't gonna be an ironic potluck. It's gonna be like family, couple, neighbor, actual potluck.
This fear causes Lars to throw out his cake and skip the potluck, missing out on Sadie, Steven, and the cool kids talking about how they actually like Lars and how they would like his company, and talking about the catchphrase he made up earlier that day.
That Lars is full of surprises. The other day he did this thing. What was it? Bingo bongo. It was transcendent.
That is so creative.
Bingo bongo.
And while Sadie is making friends with the cool kids, befriending the people that Lars always really wanted to be friends with, he is off getting kidnapped by Aquamarine and Topaz, setting in motion the space adventure that will fundamentally change him forever. After Sadie and Steven leave the party, Sadie is then subsequently kidnapped, and by the time Steven manages to break all of the humans out of the fused Topaz, they are already aboard the spaceship, where Lars makes a decision that comes to haunt him. During the fight with Aquamarine and the Topazes, Sadie is caught and asks Lars to help her, but he's so terrified he runs away and hides. And while the remaining humans and the crystal gems manages to make it off the ship, Steven agrees to return to answer for the crimes of Rose Quartz, not knowing that Lars is still on the spaceship. They then leave the Earth's atmosphere and fly far into space before Steven learns that Lars is on the ship. But it's too late for him to return to Earth. During a heart-to-heart with Steven, Lars reflects on his cowardice and how he's ashamed of himself.
Why do you think I'm capable of anything? You think I can do all this stuff, but I can't. I can't because I'm a wuss, Steven. I'm just afraid. I've always just been stupid and afraid!
Eventually, their space adventures lead to Steven and Lars ending up in the underground on Homeworld, where they encounter the Off-Colors. And Lars, finally having had enough of his cowardice and wanting to be a better, more confident person, manages to save the Off-Colors from the Gem Seekers and is inadvertently killed in the process, before Steven revives him in the pink, immortal, never-aging, familiar form. And Lars, reflecting on how selfish and cowardly he's been for most of his life, allows Steven to travel travel back home through his magical head and sets off on his journey home to Earth along with the Off-Colors as a space pirate captain. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Sadie is distraught that Lars is stuck in space. She goes on to blame Mayor Dewey for there not being better security in Beach City to avoid people being abducted into space.
What kind of mayor doesn't know when his own people are lost in space?
Although, who can blame her, because she goes through a range of emotions in a very short time. First, she thinks her and Lars are moving closer, she makes some new friends, then Lars disappears, then she is kidnapped, they're held captive for days, then when she really needs Lars, he isn't there for her, then she has to jump out of a spaceship seeing her friend give himself up and disappearing, only to realize that her other friend didn't escape, and then suddenly having to deal with the fact that only one of those friends returns, and then has to tell her that their mutual friend is lost in space for who knows how long. And then to add to that, she has to take all of the shifts at the Big Donuts, both her own and Lars's, and do all of the work, although she usually does, but now she doesn't have anyone to talk to or to alleviate the pressure. But the silver lining to all this is that Sadie finally realizes how thankless her job is and comes to reflect on how much of her youth she has missed out on by not being more courageous and hanging out with her peers.
What's the point of all this time I'm spending here at this dead-end job?
She once again hangs out with the cool kids, and together they write a song, and the cool kids really want Sadie to join their band. And although she initially rejects this offer, she decides to quit working at the Big Donut and throw herself out into this new adventure as Sadie Killer, front woman for the Suspects. This turns out to be a really good decision for her. She makes friends, she has a creative outlet, she is a really good singer, and she can finally enjoy an interest where her mother respects her enough to not butt in and try to take it over. This allows Sadie to gain all the confidence she's been missing her whole life. She's also able to utilize her love for horror movies in the performances of Sadie Killer and the Suspects. And while Sadie is breaking out of her shell, so is Lars when he becomes captain of the Off-Colors aboard the Sun Incinerator. It's quite ironic that the attraction between Lars and Sadie has always been mutual. They have been friends and co-workers for years, but it's not until they are separated by the oddest of circumstances that both of them manage to break out of their shells. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that both of them allowed the other one to be a comfort zone that they didn't need to break out of. They had each other even if it was a tentative relationship, but it was passable, it was good enough. It was someone to hang out with and watch movies in your room without anyone else knowing, or going to underground wrestling matches in lack of other people you might rather spend time with. For Lars, it was also the ability to have a non-committal relationship with someone, while for Sadie, it was this dream of eventually getting the relationship she wanted. In the episode Lars of the Stars, when Steven and Connie go to visit Lars, they tell him about Sadie Killer and the Suspects. And Lars is upset that Sadie is not mourning him, that she's moving on and living her life, because he assumed that she was sitting around waiting for him, which she did at first. He's so distracted by his emotions that he neglects his captaining duties to the point that Emerald almost manages to take back the Sun Incinerator from them. And Steven and Connie need to talk some sense into him, asking him if he's having all these adventures just to spite Sadie, which of course he refuses because he needs to get home, and he recognizes that Sadie needs to live her life as well.
No! I'm doing this because I have to. I'd never do this to hurt Sadie.
Lars proves himself to be a formidable space captain, being able to manipulate Emerald's feelings towards the Sun Incinerator, which is technically her ship, knowing that she wouldn't destroy it so he can get away from her. Lars is able to tap into all the confidence he has been lacking from his everyday life now that he is in space and he can be someone completely different and completely new. He had always dismissed Steven and the Crystal Gems as weird. He didn't like living in Beach City because he thought it was weird. He was too self-conscious to to stay friends with Ronaldo because he liked being weird. But now that he is in the thick of it, that he is among gems, he embraces all of this weird and he loves it. So even though he's the member of the Off-Colors who should be least qualified to be the captain, knowing nothing about space, nothing about space travel, and being by far the youngest, he thrives in this leadership position, this trust that these beings have given to him. And it is through this confidence that Steven and Connie, and by extension Stevani, are also willing to follow him as a leader, even though Steven would probably be the more qualified in every aspect. And while Lars aboard the Sun Incinerator is traveling home towards Earth, Sadie Killer and the Suspect is becoming an increasingly more popular band, being able to play at a venue in Empire City thanks to their manager, Crewniverse, eventually leading to them going on a tour and planning to host a concert in Beach City. It is at this concert, moments after the Crystal Gems return in Pink Diamond's leg ship, that the Sun Incinerator with Lars and the Off-Colors finally lands, and Lars is back on Earth in Beach City, where he reunites with Sadie in a moment that is really sweet to the shipper heart, I'll admit.
Look at you! You're a space pirate.
Look at you! You're a rock star!
Well...
I think it suits us.
Yeah. Me too.
And strictly speaking, if one just stops watching here, the two of them are probably together. But looking back at the show proper, we don't really have any particularly good moments to say that the two of them would work out as a good couple. Strictly speaking, at this point, after both of them have been on their character journeys, having gained confidence from their different adventures, embraced parts of themselves they never realized they could be, making friends, and even more so, making friends they never thought they were gonna make, they're definitely in better and more mature positions to begin a healthy relationship. But because the two of them already have so much baggage with each other, it's understandable why it wouldn't really work. Furthermore, their growth, their development happens separately from each other. It doesn't happen along with each other. So while they are away from each other, they are growing, and they are growing apart. While they had feelings for each other back before Lars even went into space, neither of them were at a point wherein they could realistically commit to a relationship. Both of them lacked the confidence. Lars to be open and honest about his feelings and say, yeah, I'm dating Sadie, and Sadie not being willing to put her foot down and say, listen Lars, if this thing is going to happen, you better step up. But as both of them are growing, they are also outgrowing the old versions of each other. So even if one of them stayed frozen while the other one had their journey of development, they would still not fit. In the movie, we get a glimpse of them still both living in Beach City 2 years after Change Your Mind. Sadie Killer and the Suspects are still performing, doing so at the old warehouse in a plot point in the movie. And in Steven Universe Future, we learn that Lars has opened his own bakery called Little Spacetries. And everything seems like they're just fine and good and dandy. That is until the final official episode of these two characters' little graduation. This episode is part of Steven's mental breakdown when he has to deal with the fact that his friends are moving on in life and he isn't. And to his horror, he learns that not only have Lars and Sadie broken up, Lars is planning on going with the Off-Colors back into space, and Sadie has a new partner, Shep, whom she is forming a musical duo with after Sadie Killer and the Suspects officially break up. When Steven traps everyone in his honeycomb-esque bubble, Steven confronts Lars and Sadie about the fact that he doesn't understand why they broke up because he wasn't around to see the things that led to their breakup.
But when did this happen? I didn't see any of this!
They explain to him that though they tried reconnecting, it just never worked out for them. It is clear that Lars still harbors feelings for Sadie, but he realizes that he has to let her go because she's better off with Shep. and Sadie tells Steven that the conversation they had was private and that's why he wasn't privy to it. Although it is really sad to think about that a lot of Lars's motivation when he was traveling home was to get back home to Sadie. He had told the off-colors about her and they were so excited to meet her, and he was finally ready for them to actually have a relationship, and then it just never worked out for them. So I admit that the first time I watched Steven Universe Future, I didn't really like it. It is a sharp contrast to the original show, where we just have Steven as this happy-go-lucky boy on these adventures, who sometimes has to face the fact that the world and the universe can be cruel, but he manages to get almost everyone he comes across to turn their views around and join his side. So seeing this character, who we know and love for being such a sweet and naive little creature, suddenly have to deal with the very real fallout of all of the stuff he's had to endure, it is painful. But unfortunately, that is also part of what growing up feels like. And I think Little Graduation is actually the perfect culmination of how Steven has always viewed Lars and Sadie's relationship. He's always had an idea for what he thinks it should be. He's seen so many shipping moments between them where he was like, oh my god, they're in love.
But aren't you gonna get married and have kids and name one of them after his Uncle Steven?
He's basically tried to control them, but as it turns out, he can't. He can't control people and decide who they should be and what they should do. And in a way, Lars and Sadie set the template for this lesson for Steven all the way back in their earliest appearances. In a lot of ways, I think that Lars and Sadie could have actually worked as a couple if they had had different circumstances. They have a mutual attraction to one another and they have lots of things in common and have spent lots of time together. However, growing up in the somewhat isolated beach city with few people around them didn't give either of them the best prospects for a future. We can basically see from Greg's story how easy it is to just get stuck in a small town and never really go anywhere. Of course, he's not a native from Beach City, but he is from the area. And it would be really easy for both Lars and Sadie to get stuck in a similar situation. They're already working a thankless job living in a small town, and neither of them really talk about the prospects they have for the future. If they want to go to college, if they want to move to a big city or move to a different country or anything really. Lars actively states that he hates it in Beach City because it is weird, but he makes no mention of his plan to leave. His bad grades in school would also make his options limited in adult life. Sadie, having not been able to get comfortable with any hobby, hasn't been able to explore herself enough to know which direction she wants to go in life. So it would be really easy for the two of them to just end up stuck in Beach City, maybe marrying each other, having some kids, and just living out the rest of their days there without daring to try and be anything more. Which is something that neither of them seemingly want, but are also kind of willing to settle for. Now, if their circumstances had been different, if they had lived in a bigger area maybe, if they had had more friends around them, if they had had more fulfilling everyday lives, they might have had more confidence, which could have allowed for them to be a more healthy and mature couple together. Or if the two of them had first met at the end of Change Your Mind, when they have gone through their character journeys and not have had all the baggage. But of course, if it weren't for each other, they wouldn't be the people they ended up being. They wouldn't have had that growth. So at the end of the day, I think the Steven Universe managed to tell a great story with Lars and Sadie, even with their limited screen time, about how growing up sometimes means changing the way you view yourself in the world and being open to the fact that the person you thought you were supposed to be or the person you thought you were supposed to be with might not actually be what's right for you. And you have to be brave and open your mind to there being more adventures out there for you.
Sadie knows I miss her, but she knows how happy I am that she found someone better for her.
Aww. And Lars knows I'm really glad he found himself in space with his new gem friends.
And that is a really nice story to tell through a complicated, messy teen relationship that had a good few yikes moments. So yeah, I unship it. Now, before I end the video, I wanted to talk about some of the things this analysis made me consider about how I think Lars is going to handle Lars of the Stars. So the whole immortal, never-aging familiar thing is actually tragic and terrifying when you think about it. As an eternal teen, already in the 2 years between Change Your Mind and Steven Universe Future, he sees the way that his peers are growing up around him. When we see Sadie in Little Graduation, she clearly has aged the 2 years that Lars hasn't. He has the maturity of someone who's 2 years older, but physically he remains the same as when he was revived. And this is surely a factor in why he and Sadie broke up. Sadie gets to enjoy the wonderful and sometimes scary experiences of being a human, the thing that Rose Quartz loved so much about humans, the ability to change and grow, the way your body is gonna alter. Sadie has a whole life to look forward to experience how she's gonna change, how the people around her are gonna change. Perhaps she's going to be a touring musician living independently her whole life, or perhaps she decides to one day settle down and have children. But either way, she is outgrowing Lars. This experience surely is also something that haunts Lars. It's the reality that he is immortal, but every human he knows is not. His parents are going to grow old and die. His peers are going to grow older around him, and he is going to stay stuck looking like a teenager who is pink. And he can trace back the reason why he is even in this situation to him being a coward, not willing to help Sadie when she needed him. If he had done that, he would have gotten to stay on Earth with his humanity intact. Although this would also mean that he never would have met the off-colors and changed his ways to become the confident space pirate he is, providing him with this double-edged sword of feeling guilty at wanting to have never met these friends whom he helped out of their predicament at being stuck in the underground of Homeworld, or being satisfied with the fact that he left his friend in a predicament because of his own cowardice, which led him to the exciting adventures he gets to have now. He has definitely been fundamentally changed by his experiences in space, which have been mostly positive, which explains why he would want to go back there. But definitely this whole fear of being stuck that he would have also felt when he was just a regular human would be intensified by being the immortal outcast among humans. If he stays on Earth, he has to deal with the fact that all these experiences that he was supposed to have, he just won't have. Everyone else is going to change in ways he never gets to experience. He may not even be able to have children anymore. He is locked out of what it means to be a human.
Everyone you know is gonna grow up without you.
He lost the possibility of a romantic relationship with Sadie when he lost his humanity, but while he was still human, he also never embraced the chance to actually be with her, meaning he will have to exist forever with the pain of having not utilized his humanity to the fullest while he still could, and now possibly never wanting to try again because he knows he can't hold on to a romance with a human since they will age and he will not. So even though he's had his cute little bakery for probably only 2 years, which isn't really a long time when you think about it, it's already long enough for him to recognize that he is not the person he used to be anymore. And by going into space with the off-colors, he has a chance to be among these beings he can be with for his eternity.
So, yeah, Steven, me and the crew are gonna...
And since so much of Steven's journey was tied to his own confusion about whether or not he was himself or his mother, I absolutely see Lars of the Stars grappling with these themes of existentialism through Lars's experiences. Whether this show picks up immediately after Future or 10 years later or 100 years later, Lars is going to grapple with the experience of the humanity he lost. And it is going to be so interesting, and I'm so excited. And I'm also manifesting that getting one space-themed sequel series to a Cartoon Network show could finally lead to Galactic Kids Next Door. Please! please. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching the video and making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. I had so much fun revisiting Steven Universe. It is one of my favorite animated shows of all time. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, please comment about any thoughts you have on this topic. Subscribe, make any suggestions you have for future videos I could make. My primary social media is Blue Sky. I will leave a link in the description or in my bio in case you want to follow me there. And have a wonderful day. Bye!
Are you gonna let me go anytime soon?
Just a couple more minutes.